The security footage would later become the most viewed recording in Galactic Council history. Not for what it showed in the beginning, a routine execution, the kind carried out on 1,000 worlds, but for what came after. For what emerged from the jungle 97 cycles later. They say humans are unkillable. They say humans are insane. But Captain Vex'thor of the Kryllian Empire had dismissed such rumors as propaganda, the desperate tales told by species too weak to properly subjugate their enemies. He'd captured the human mercenary 3 months prior, had watched the creature sit calmly in its cell, had even felt a measure of respect for how it accepted its fate without begging or bargaining like so many other species did. The human's crime? Interfering with a Kryllian mining operation on a protected world. Helping the natives evacuate before the atmospheric processors rendered their planet uninhabitable. Noble, perhaps. Stupid, certainly. And according to Kryllian law, punishable by death. But death among the Kryllian wasn't a quick affair. It was a lesson. A warning.
A spectacle.
The human stood in the airlock of the Sovereign's wrath, hands bound, wearing nothing but the thin prisoner's garment that would offer zero protection from what awaited below. The human looked out through the transparent aluminum at the planet beneath Vex'thor, what the rest of the galaxy called the Green Hell. A deathworld so hostile that even the Kryllian military refused to establish bases on its surface. Any last words, human? Vex'thor had asked, his translator rendering his clicking mandibles into standard galactic common. The human had smiled. Actually smiled. See you in 3 months. Vex'thor's secondary arms had twitched in what might have been laughter. The record survival time on Vex'thor is 4 hours, human. And that was a fully equipped Dravithian combat team. You won't last the night. Then I guess I'll break the record. The airlock had opened. The human had been sucked out into the screaming atmosphere, tumbling toward the endless green canopy below. Vex'thor had watched until the human disappeared into the jungle. Then he'd marked the coordinates, filed the execution report, and thought nothing more of it. That was 97 cycles ago. Now, the entire bridge crew of the Sovereign's Wrath stood frozen, staring at their sensor screens in what could only be described as collective shock. The ship had returned to Vex'thor as part of its regular patrol route. Standard procedure. Routine. Except the sensors were picking up something that made absolutely no sense. Captain, the sensor operator whispered, all 4 of his eyes wide with disbelief. There's a signal beacon. Human frequency, coming from the surface. Vex'thor felt his blood chill. Impossible. Sir, it's broadcasting a message. On repeat. The operator's voice cracked. It says, ready for pickup. The bridge erupted in chaos. Overlapping voices arguing about sensor malfunctions, about tricks, about anything that could explain what they were seeing. But Vex'thor knew better. He'd seen the look in that human's eyes. The certainty. The absolute confidence. Get me a visual, he commanded. Now. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the jungle clearing where the beacon signal originated. What they saw would haunt Vex'thor for the rest of his days. The human was alive. Not just alive, thriving. Standing tall and bronze-skinned under the alien sun. Muscles that definitely hadn't been there 3 months ago, rippling under scars that told stories of countless battles. The human's hair had grown long and wild, adorned with what appeared to be bones and feathers. Tribal markings covered the human's arms and chest in patterns that seemed to shimmer in the light. But that wasn't the impossible part. The human was standing on the back of a Vorta render dragon. Every species in the galaxy knew about render dragons. They were the reason Vex'thor was classified as a Class-XII Deathworld. The reason military strategists used the planet as a hypothetical in wargame scenarios about acceptable losses. Render dragons were 12 meters of scaled fury, apex predators that sat at the very top of Vex'thor's nightmare food chain. They hunted in packs, could tear through starship armor with their talons, and possessed a venom that could dissolve bone. And this human was riding one like it was a domesticated mount. The creature's head bore a makeshift saddle woven from vines and leather, its spines decorated with trophies, skulls of other jungle predators. The render dragon's yellow eyes fixed on the hovering ship, but it didn't attack. It simply waited, calm and patient, while its rider raised one hand in a casual wave. "Told you I'd see you in 3 months." The human's voice crackled over the comm channel. "Now how about you send down that shuttle? My apex predator here is getting impatient, and trust me, you don't want to see what happens when she's hungry." The human's name was Riley Kaine, and the first thing Riley learned upon hitting Vortis 7's surface was that every horror story about the planet was an understatement. The fall through the canopy had been brutal. Riley had tried to grab branches on the way down, managed to slow the descent enough that the final impact into the swamp water below didn't shatter every bone in the human body. The water was warm, thick, and reeked of decay. Riley surfaced gasping, immediately aware of dozens of eyes watching from the murky depths. The prison garment was already torn. Useless. Riley stripped it off and used the fabric to fashion a crude wrap, knowing that even minimal coverage would be better than nothing against the insects that were already beginning to swarm. The Kryllian had been kind enough to leave the thin polymer cords that had bound Riley's wrists. Those would come in handy. The first predator attacked within minutes. A serpent-like creature, easily 4 meters long, erupting from the water with jaws that could have swallowed Riley whole. Pure instinct saved Riley's life. A sideways dive, hands finding a submerged root, using it to swing around and kick off a tree trunk. The serpent's jaws snapped shut on empty water. Riley didn't wait to see if it would try again. Humans might be persistence hunters on Earth, but on Vortis 7, everything was a persistence hunter. The only difference was that humans were smart enough to know when to run. The jungle was alive with sound. Chirping, clicking, roaring, screaming. A symphony of violence that never ceased. Riley moved through the underbrush, every nerve on fire, every sense heightened by adrenaline. This was what humans were built for, Riley thought. Not comfort, not safety, but this, the razor's edge between life and death where every decision mattered. The sun was setting quickly, and night on a death world was exponentially more dangerous than day. Riley needed shelter, needed fire, needed weapons, needed all of this in the next hour or the morning would never come. A rocky outcropping appeared through the trees, partially concealed by hanging vines. Riley approached carefully, checking for signs of occupation. The cave mouth was narrow, barely wide enough for a human, which meant perfect. Nothing bigger could follow inside. Riley gathered dry moss and small twigs, then used the oldest trick humanity had ever known. The polymer cords from the bindings became a bow drill. A flat stone became the fireboard. Riley's hands moved with practiced precision, spinning the drill faster and faster until smoke began to rise. Then a spark. Then a flame. Fire. Humanity's first gift to itself. Still humanity's best friend millions of years later. The small fire at the cave entrance would keep most predators at bay. Most but not all. Riley ventured back out into the darkening jungle, moving quickly now, gathering longer branches and sharpening them against rocks. Spears, crude but effective. 5 of them, arranged in a defensive perimeter around the cave mouth. Then the screaming started. It came from everywhere and nowhere. A sound that Riley's hindbrain recognized as predator, as danger, as run. But there was nowhere to run. Riley retreated into the cave, fire-hardened spear in hand, and waited. They came at full dark. Shadow stalkers the human's brain supplied, remembering the briefing files from the failed Dravithian expedition. 4-legged, covered in something between fur and scales, with bioluminescent markings that pulsed hypnotically in the darkness. Pack hunters. Intelligent. Lethal. There were 6 of them circling the cave. They tested the defenses, probing for weakness. One got too close to the fire and Riley thrust the spear through the flames, feeling it connect with flesh. The creature shrieked and retreated. The others learned. They began to coordinate, trying to draw Riley's attention while another flanked. Riley fought for 3 hours straight, thrusting, dodging, using the narrow cave entrance as a choke point. When the spear broke, Riley used broken stone. When exhaustion threatened, Riley screamed back at them, the old primate threat display, the one that said, "I'm crazy enough to fight and you might win, but I'll hurt you first." Eventually, they left. Not because they gave up, but because something bigger was coming. something that made even apex predators like shadow stalkers retreat into the underbrush and go silent. Riley heard it before seeing it, a deep, rhythmic breathing that shook the ground. Then the render dragon stepped into the firelight, its scales reflecting the flames like burnished copper. 12 meters of perfect killing machine, yellow eyes fixed on the human in the cave with something that looked almost like curiosity. This was it, Riley thought, the end. But humans didn't survive for millennia by knowing when to quit. Riley stood up, met those alien eyes, and raised the broken spear. "Come on then," Riley whispered. "Let's see which one of us is really the apex predator here." The render dragon didn't attack. This confused Riley more than if it had simply tried to kill immediately like every other creature on this nightmare planet. Instead, the massive predator sat back on its haunches, head tilting in a gesture that seemed almost avian, studying the small human with an intelligence that was distinctly unsettling. Riley knew the statistics. Render dragons were rated as Category 5 hostile apex predators by the Galactic Council. They hunted in family groups, communicated with complex vocalizations, and had been observed using rudimentary tool use to crack open the armored shells of their prey. In every measurable way, they were the perfect predator. But Riley had something the render dragon didn't: desperation combined with human ingenuity, which throughout history had proven to be the most dangerous combination in the universe. The standoff lasted until dawn. The dragon never entered the cave, but never left either. It simply watched, occasionally making low rumbling sounds that might have been communication or might have been digestion. Riley stayed awake through sheer force of will, knowing that falling asleep meant death. When the sun finally rose, painting the jungle in shades of emerald and gold, the render dragon made a sound, a sharp, barking call, and 3 younger dragons emerged from the undergrowth. Juveniles, though still massive enough to take down most species. The adult was a female, Riley realized. And this cave, this was near her hunting territory. The female turned and walked away. The juveniles followed. But before disappearing into the jungle, she looked back once, those yellow eyes meeting Riley's, and Riley understood. The message was clear: you survived the night. That's worth something. But this is my territory now. Stay out of my way. Riley had no intention of staying out of her way, because the human brain, that wonderful, terrible organ, had already formulated a plan. A crazy, probably suicidal plan. But crazy was what humans did best. The render dragon was an apex predator. But apex predators needed to eat. And if Riley could figure out what she hunted, Riley could use that. For the next 2 weeks, Riley followed the dragon family from a distance, learning their patterns. They hunted in the early morning and late afternoon, targeting the massive herbivores that moved through the jungle in herds, 6-legged behemoths called thunderbacks that could shake the ground with their footfalls. A single thunderback could feed a dragon family for days. Riley watched how the dragons coordinated their attacks. The juveniles would harass from the flanks while the mother went for the killing blow. A leap onto the back, claws finding purchase in the thick hide, jaws clamping down on the spine. Efficient, brutal, perfect. But Riley noticed something else. The dragons avoided certain areas of the jungle. Places where the vegetation grew differently, where the ground was marked with deep gouges and the trees bore scars 10 meters up their trunks. Something else lived there. Something that even render dragons feared. Riley found it on the 16th day. Another apex predator, but even larger than the render dragon. A titan boar. What the Dravithian expedition had called planet killers. 20 meters of armored fury with tusks that could gore a ship's hull. Solitary.
Territorial.
And absolutely lethal. The titan boar was sick. Riley could see it in the way it moved. The discharge from its nostrils, the labored breathing. Some kind of respiratory infection, maybe from a wound that had gone septic. It was dying, but it would take weeks or months, and in the meantime it would kill anything that came near. Riley spent 3 days preparing. The forest provided everything: vines strong enough to hold a human's weight, sap that was sticky enough to work as adhesive, bamboo-like plants that grew straight and could be sharpened to deadly points. Riley wove them together into something that hadn't been seen on Earth in thousands of years, but had never stopped being effective: a trap. The hard part was the bait. Riley needed to wound the Titan boar enough to enrage it, then lead it back to the trap zone. This required getting close. Very close. Close enough that if anything went wrong, there wouldn't be enough of Riley left to identify. Riley found a tree that overlooked one of the Titan boar's preferred resting spots and waited. When the creature settled in for its midday rest, Riley dropped down onto its back. The Titan boar exploded into motion. Riley had approximately 3 seconds to drive the sharpened stake into the infected wound area before the creature's rage became directed and focused. The stake sank deep. The Titan boar roared, a sound that made Riley's bones vibrate and probably scared wildlife for kilometers. Then it charged. Riley ran. Ran like every human who had ever been chased by something bigger and meaner had run since the species climbed down from trees and decided the savannah looked like a nice place to live. The trap was half a kilometer away through dense jungle. The Titan boar was right behind, destroying everything in its path. Riley could feel its breath, hot and fetid, could hear the trees splintering like toothpicks. The trap grew closer. Closer. Riley leaped. The trap worked perfectly. The Titan boar, in its rage-blind charge, never saw the carefully concealed pit Riley had spent days digging and camouflaging. It crashed through the false floor and fell 3 meters onto the sharpened stakes below. The roar that followed wasn't anger anymore. It was pain, primal and terrible. Riley didn't wait to watch it die. The sound would attract every predator in the territory, and Riley needed to be far away when they arrived. But Riley had miscalculated one thing. The render dragon mother had been closer than expected. She emerged from the undergrowth as Riley ran, not charging but moving parallel, matching Riley's pace easily. This time her body language was different. Not aggressive, not threatening, something else. Her head lowered, nostrils flaring, taking in Riley's scent mixed with the blood and fierce sweat from the encounter with the Titan boar. Riley stopped running. There was nowhere to go anyway. She could chase Riley down in seconds if she wanted. Instead, Riley turned to face her, breathing hard, covered in mud and gore, probably looking more like a jungle creature than a civilized spacefaring species. The dragon approached slowly. Riley stood perfectly still, every muscle screaming to run, to fight, to do anything except stand there while an apex predator got close enough to bite Riley's head off. She sniffed at Riley, that same curious head tilt from their first encounter, then made a low chirping sound. The juveniles appeared, more cautious than their mother. They circled Riley, keeping their distance but clearly curious about this strange, small creature that smelled like blood and victory. Then the mother dragon did something unprecedented. She turned her back on Riley, a gesture of trust among predators, and walked toward the pit where the Titan boar was dying. She looked back once, made another chirping sound, and waited. Riley understood. The dragon wasn't just intelligent. She was analytical. She'd watched Riley track her family, watched Riley set an elaborate trap for something that even dragons avoided, watched Riley succeed where everything else would have failed. And now she was inviting Riley to share in the kill. In predator terms, this was an alliance offer. Riley approached the pit carefully. The Titan boar was still alive but dying, its lifeblood pooling in the bottom of the trap. The mother dragon looked at Riley, then at the creature, then back at Riley, and rumbled deep in her chest, a sound that Riley was beginning to recognize as approval. They waited together until the Titan boar finally stilled. Then the dragon family fed, and for the first time in weeks, Riley ate meat. Real, substantial protein. The dragon mother tore off chunks and pushed them toward Riley, the same way she fed her juveniles. Riley's human stomach rebelled at the raw flesh, but Riley forced it down anyway. This was survival. This was respect. This was the beginning of something unprecedented. Over the next weeks, the relationship deepened. Riley learned to read the dragon's body language, to understand her vocalizations. In return, the dragon learned that the human was small but clever, weak but determined, soft but somehow more dangerous than things 3 times Riley's size. Riley began crafting tools in earnest now. Stone knives, better spears, a crude axe. The dragons watched with fascination as Riley transformed raw materials into weapons and tools. The juveniles tried to mimic Riley, using their claws to scratch at stones, making rumbling sounds that might have been laughter when they failed. The mother dragon, who Riley had started calling Apex, because she was the apex predator of this entire jungle, began bringing her kills closer to Riley's improved shelter. Not charity, Riley understood, but investment. She was keeping her small, strange pack member healthy and strong. Riley started contributing in return. Humans might not have claws or venom, but humans had something better, the ability to see patterns, to plan, to strategize. Riley began scouting ahead of hunts, identifying weak or sick prey, finding the best approach paths. The dragon family's success rate improved dramatically. One morning, Apex did something that changed everything. She lowered her massive head to the ground in front of Riley and rumbled softly. Not a threat, not a question, but an invitation. Riley approached slowly, placed a hand on her scaled snout. Her skin was warm, rough, surprisingly smooth between the scales. She closed her eyes and leaned into the touch, the same way the juveniles did when she groomed them. The bond was sealed. That afternoon, Riley began working on a saddle. If the Galactic Council could see this, they would lose their minds. A human, not just surviving on a Class-XII Deathworld, but bonding with its apex predator, turning the most dangerous creature on the planet into an ally, a mount, a friend. Riley worked the leather and vines, thinking about Captain Vex'thor and his certainty that Riley wouldn't last the night. Thinking about the look on his face when Riley rode Apex back to civilization. 3 months, Riley murmured to Apex, who rumbled in response. Just 3 months and we're going to blow some minds. The true test of their bond came in the 8th week, when another render dragon male entered Apex's territory. Riley heard him before seeing him. A challenge roar that echoed through the jungle and sent the juveniles scattering for cover. This was nature at its rawest. A territorial dispute between apex predators, and anyone caught in the middle would be collateral damage. Apex's response was immediate and volcanic. She rose to her full height, scales shifting to a deeper, more aggressive coloration that Riley hadn't seen before, and released her own roar. A sound that made Riley's teeth ache and knocked several fruit from nearby trees. The message was clear. This is my territory, my hunting grounds, my family. Riley had exactly 3 seconds to decide. Hide like the juveniles had or stand with Apex. Any rational being would have chosen to hide. Even on Earth, humans knew better than to get between fighting predators. But Riley had stopped being entirely rational somewhere around the 3rd week of eating raw meat and sleeping in trees. Riley grabbed the bone spear, the one crafted from a titan boar rib and lashed with sinew, and moved to stand beside Apex. The dragon glanced down at Riley, made a sound that was almost questioning, almost concerned. Riley planted the spear in the ground and screamed back at the intruder, the same primal challenge cry that humans had been using since they first learned to make sound. The male dragon froze, clearly confused about what this tiny, noisy creature was doing. Apex used his moment of confusion to charge. The fight was brutal and short. 2 apex predators, each weighing several tons, colliding in an explosion of scales and claws and teeth. They grappled, bit, tore at each other while Riley circled, looking for an opening. The male was larger, but Apex was defending her territory with the kind of fury that only a mother protecting her young could muster. Then Riley saw it. The male had gotten behind Apex, was going for her spine. Riley didn't think. Thinking was for safe times, civilized times, times when you weren't watching your bond partner about to be killed. Riley ran forward and drove the bone spear up into the soft tissue under the male's jaw. The spear barely penetrated his scales, but it was enough. The surprise, the pain, the sheer audacity of this tiny creature attacking him. It made him hesitate for a fraction of a second. That fraction was all Apex needed. Her jaws closed around his throat and she twisted, using her superior leverage and his off-balance position to throw him down. The male dragon thrashed once, twice, then went still. He wasn't dead, but he was finished. Apex released him and he fled, limping, leaving a trail of blood that would mark his shame for any other dragons who crossed his path. Apex turned to Riley, bleeding from a dozen wounds but alive and victorious. She lowered her massive head and pressed her snout against Riley's chest, carefully gentle, rumbling in a way that Riley had learned meant contentment, approval, family. Riley wrapped both arms around her head as far as they would reach, and for a moment, just breathed. The juveniles emerged from hiding, chirping excitedly, clustering around both Apex and Riley. They'd witnessed something unprecedented. Their mother accepting another species as a true member of the pack, not as prey, not as competition, but as family. After that fight, something shifted in the jungle. Other predators began to recognize Riley's scent mixed with Apex's, and they learned to avoid it. Shadow stalkers that once hunted in Riley's territory now gave the area wide berth. Serpents slithered away at Riley's approach. Even the massive thunderbacks seemed to sense that this small creature was no longer prey, but predator. Riley spent the final weeks preparing for extraction. The saddle was complete now, woven from the strongest materials the jungle offered, fitted perfectly to Apex's shoulders and spine. Riley taught her commands, not in Galactic Common or English, but in a language they developed together, part human voice, part draconic rumble, part pure understanding that transcended words. Forward, stop, hunt, danger, family. They practiced together, Riley learning to move with Apex's gait, to lean into her turns, to trust her completely when she launched into the air for those brief, terrifying glides from tree to tree. The juveniles watched and learned, and Riley realized with a start that they were learning from a human, that their hunting strategies would forever be influenced by human tactics, human planning, human cunning. Riley was changing them, but they had changed Riley too. The soft, civilized human who had been pushed out of that airlock was gone. In its place was something new, still human, but enhanced by the jungle, tempered by survival, bonded to an apex predator in a way that the galaxy had never seen. The 97-day mark approached. Time to call for pickup and show the Kryllian what humans were really capable of. The shuttle descended through Vorta 7's atmosphere with obvious reluctance, its pilot probably questioning every life choice that had led to this moment. Riley watched from Apex's back, one hand resting on her neck scales, feeling the rumble of curiosity that vibrated through her massive body. Captain Vex'thor's voice crackled over the calm human. "We require verification." How is this possible? Riley smiled, the expression wild and fierce and nothing like the prisoner who'd been thrown from the Sovereign's wrath 3 months ago. "You made a mistake, Captain. You thought being an apex predator was about size, about claws, about venom. But you know what makes something truly apex? Adaptability, intelligence, the willingness to do whatever it takes to survive." Apex raised her head and roared, a sound of pure dominance that sent every creature in the jungle into terrified silence. The juveniles emerged from the tree line, taking positions around Riley and their mother, a unified pack that had learned to hunt with human strategy and draconic power. "That's what makes humans apex predators, Captain. We don't just survive hostile environments. We master them. We form alliances with the strongest creatures in the ecosystem. We turn deathworlds into homes and apex predators into family." Riley paused, letting that sink in. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to land that shuttle. You're going to take me back to your ship. And you're going to spread the word across the entire Kryllian Empire about what happened here." The shuttle landed, its pilots 4 eyes wide with terror as Apex approached. Riley dismounted, pressing a hand to her snout one last time. "I'll come back," Riley promised in their shared language. "This is my territory too now." Apex rumbled understanding, then turned and disappeared into the jungle with her juveniles, leaving Riley standing alone in the clearing. Except Riley wasn't alone anymore. Riley carried the jungle inside now, carried the knowledge that humans weren't just survivors. They were adapters, alliance builders, the species that looked at the galaxy's worst nightmares and asked, "Can I ride it?" As the shuttle lifted off, Riley looked back at the green hell below, at the territory that had tried to kill Riley and instead had forged Riley into something stronger. The Kryllian thought they'd given Riley a death sentence. Instead, they'd given humanity a new template for survival. Somewhere in that jungle, an apex predator roared. And Riley smiled, knowing it was a goodbye and a promise both. The galaxy called them Deathworlds. Humans call them opportunities. If you enjoyed this story of human resilience and the unbreakable bond between species, don't leave yet. Click on the next video where we explore what happens when humanity makes first contact with a species that communicates through combat, and humans turn out to be natural speakers of violence. You won't believe how they negotiate peace treaties. The HFY universe is just getting started. See you in the next one.